Everything you have been taught about death is wrong. But not just wrong, it is an innocent mistake. Wrong as in a carefully crafted lie. Wrong as in a secret buried beneath layers of fear and control and silence. A truth so powerful that if understood, it could set not only your soul free, but humanity itself. And this truth is not new. It has been whispered in the secret corridors of esoteric schools, recorded in lost papyri, carved into the walls of ancient temples, and most recently written by the woman who dared to tear the veil of the invisible, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Daughter of the Russian Empire, founder of the Theosophical Society, loved by few, hated by many, Blavatsky has been called a ruler, a witch, an impostor. But anyone who has read her with the eyes of the soul knows. She saw what almost everyone refuses to see, and she tried to warn us. Death, Blavatsky said, is not the end. It is not oblivion. It is not divine punishment. Death is a passage, a change of state, a test. And these are not just tests, the most important ones you will ever face. The test that will decide whether you will be freed from the endless cycle of birth and death, or whether you will be sucked back into another life of illusion. This is knowledge that for centuries was available only to initiates in the Himalayas, hidden between the lines of one of the most mysterious manuscripts ever written, the Barda Thadal, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a map for the 49 days after the death of the physical body, a guide for consciousness when it suddenly finds itself separated from matter, immersed in a world created by the mind itself. But why is it so little heard of? Why is this knowledge not in schools, churches, temples? Why have you believed all your life that death is an end, a punishment, or an impenetrable mystery? Blavatsky had an answer. Because this truth is dangerous. Dangerous to systems of power, to dogmatic religions, to everything based on fear. If you knew that no one would judge you, that there was no literal hell or heaven to reward the obedient, that what awaited you after death was yourself, your own consciousness reflected in forms and sounds and lights and shadows, then how could they control you? How could they sell you redemption? How could they convince you that you had to sacrifice yourself to earn what was already yours by spiritual right? Blavatsky knew that death was the great mystery of the modern West, and she knew that this mystery had been discovered in the East for millennia, but only to those who were ready, because the truth about death is not comforting, it is not romantic, it takes courage, composure, presence, and above all, awareness. Bartle describes in great detail what happens at the moment of death. When the heart stops and the last breath is taken, you do not disappear. Something falls out, something rises up. The soul, or rather the consciousness, sees itself outside the body, observing everything from a formless place. It is not a dream. It is not a hallucination. It is more real than anything you have experienced. And at that moment there is a flash, a radiance so intense, so absolute, that it seems to dissolve all notion of identity. It is the clear light of reality. Blavatsky called it the spark of the absolute, the meeting place of being and non-being. If you recognize this light, if you surrender to it without fear, you are free. To transcend, to reach what the masters call moksha, nirvana, or simply the end of a cycle. But almost no one recognizes this. Why? Because the soul is conditioned. Because all its life it has identified itself with a name, a history, a body, and then it clings to the past, to wishes, to loved ones, to fears. And when it clings, it moves away from the light, and when it retreats, it falls. Then comes what most people get lost. Distorted sounds, familiar voices calling from the other side, shapes that look like figures, sensations of a rupture in time. None of this is real, but it becomes so because the Bard is a mirror, a place where your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs take shape, color, and sound. Blavatsky said, the mind, the creator, and executioner of the soul. In the Bard, it is literal. And here comes an awkward question. If everything we experience after death is a reflection of the mind, what does that say about who we are in life? Are we creating ghosts now that will haunt us later? Are there monsters inside us already that will haunt us after death? The answer is yes. And so the preparation for death begins in life. The training is neither religious nor moralistic. Quiet, inner work, learning to see through illusions, recognizing the tricks of the mind, dissolving the ego before it consumes you, die before death. Elena Blavatsky dedicated her life to warning us of this. Her books, like The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, are full of symbolic clues to what awaits us beyond matter. But she knew that few would listen, because the truth about death is also the truth about life. You are the author of your reality here, now, and then. And if that is true, if what you think and feel and believe shapes not only your current experience, but also what happens after your last breath, then the question changes. It is no longer a question of what happens after death. The real question is, am I living in such a way that I die awake? And maybe you already know the answer. But if you don't blame yourself. We have been trained not to think about it, to fear it, to avoid it, to treat death as a taboo, as a curse, as a defeat. When in fact, this is the great initiation, the final passage, the portal through which the true essence is revealed. And if you have come this far, reading the words, you may already be crossing this portal from within, because awakening to the truth about death is, in fact, awakening to life. But be careful. What happens next may shake everything you believed in, because the light that shines at the moment of death is also a trap. And if you are not ready, it will become a shadow. And the shadow, as Blavatsky knew in many ways, the journey has just begun. The body is no more. The pulse is no more. The breath is no more. But there is awareness. And this is where most people get it wrong. We think that death is the end of perception, when in fact it is the beginning of the greatest clash between who you are and who you think you are. This is where the game changes. And if you are not ready, you will not even notice that the game has begun. Consciousness, freed from the body, floats for a moment in a seemingly timeless space. But that moment is not neutral. It is the seed of everything that will happen later. And how you respond to that moment changes everything. Helena Blavatsky said that the soul carries with it a magnetic echo of its earthly mind after death. Every fear, every unresolved desire, every unquestioned conviction becomes the subtle substance of a bard. Like an artist painting with the colors of the unconscious, you become the creator of your own world. But most do not know this, and so it creates confusion. It all begins with sound. A noise perhaps, an echo, familiar but distant voices calling your name. Some are smooth, others have an unsettling strangeness, like a whisper coming from behind a shaking mirror. And you listen because you want to understand, because you want to go back, because you want to feel like you still belong somewhere. Then the images come, fast, smooth, vague, faces you've loved, places you've seen, memories, moments. But something is wrong, as if everything was hastily made, a carbon copy, without depth, without scent, without texture, a paper reality. The mind in a panic grabs at what it recognizes. It attaches because the new is frightening, because the void is frightening, because seeing yourself as something beyond the body requires an awareness that few develop in life. And that's the first great test, to recognize what is real and what is just a trap of memories. Imagine a woman who has mourned the loss of her son for years, never overcoming it, never forgiving. In the moment after death, the first face she sees is her son's, young, alive, calling to her, arms outstretched. But he is not there, it's not him. This is the image she projected, the image your subconscious created to comfort you. And as she follows, he walks away from the bright light. He walks away from the possibility of liberation. Walk away from yourself. Blavatsky claimed that after death, the mind enters a state of intense activity where every thought takes shape. But these shapes are not harmless. They seduce, they lie. They use the language of emotion to trap the soul in a repeating cycle. And the more you believe in what you see, the more real it becomes, until you forget you are dreaming. And don't think that this is something far away. It is happening now, in the way you react to memories, in the way you fantasize about the past, in the way you get lost in future worries and illusions. Bardo is a state of mind that manifests itself in both life and death. There are people who live trapped in memories, as if the past were more real than the present. There are others who live in anticipation of the future, never touching the present. It is no different from what happens after death. The difference is that here, thoughts become the environment. Here they simply color your perceptions. In the Bard, you become a prisoner of what you most desire and what you most fear. A woman obsessed with youth may find herself surrounded by distorted reflections of herself, trying in vain to preserve a beauty that no longer matters. A man who has dedicated his life to the search for power may see thrones, castles, servants, and become lost in the delusion of controlling a kingdom that does not exist. Meanwhile, the light waits. The silent patient is a test of the mind. Can you recognize a dream while you are in it? Can you say no to comfort? Can you leave behind what you love most in the name of who you really are? Most cannot. Most hold on because we have been taught to. From a young age, we are taught to seek security, approval, permanence. No one teaches us how to die. No one teaches us to let go. Blavatsky, however, warned. He warned that the world we see is a layer. There are planes beyond matter where the mind reveals itself in its purest form, and that the danger is not in these planes, but in ourselves. What do we take there? In the Bard, you will find your religion, your myths, your fears. If you believe in angels, you will see angels. If you believe in demons, you will see demons. If you hope to find heaven, it will come, but only as a reflection of your hope. And that is not freedom, it is a mirror. The real difficulty is looking through the mirror. Realize that what you see is not true. The love you feel for these images is often attachment, that the fear you feel is actually resistance to surrender. For example, a person who blindly believed in a religious figure may find it in a bard. You can kneel, you can hear words of consolation, you can follow this figure into a new incarnation. But what if this figure is just a projection of your conditioned mind? What if, by following this guide, he is simply running away from true liberation? It is a cruel dilemma, but also an opportunity, because every illusion you think is an illusion dissolves. Every attachment you let go of is released. Every fear you face loses its power. Blavatsky said that the true initiate is not the one who believes in more truths, but the one who knows that everything is symbolic, that reality is beyond form, beyond the voice, beyond the image, that the deity does not present itself with a face, it is silence. And perhaps that is what you need to hear right now. Silence. For in the midst of the bard's illusions, there is a moment when everything stops, where there are no more sounds, no more forms, no more memories, just an empty, bright, present field. And if you can remain aware in that space, you will liberate yourself. But how many are willing to accept emptiness as the only real path? How many are willing to give up everything, including the idea of self? This is the second great obstacle after death. Don't confuse consolation with truth. Don't follow the known path. And most importantly, don't forget that you are being tested, because the test is silent. It doesn't warn you of the beginning, simply watches. And the moment you choose to follow an image, a sound, a memory, that is the moment you decide whether to remain trapped or to awaken. And that moment may be closer than you think. Because if you look closely, you may already be living inside one of these illusions. The difference is that here you can still awaken. There it may be too late. First comes the glimmer, then the memory, and then the fear. It does not look like a monster, not even like a scream. It comes quietly like a creeping doubt, like a crack in what seemed like light. The soul that once wavered between visions of comfort and cherished memories now feels something shift. A slight tremor, a cutting sound, a gaze that watches it but has no face. In the Bard, this is the moment when many begin to fall, because what was a dream begins to distort. Forms become ambiguous. Sweet voices now whisper things you don't want to hear, and images of things you love slowly dissolve into distorted silhouettes, as if something is wrong in the sky of your own consciousness. But what exactly is happening? According to Helena Blavatsky, this is the moment when the lower elemental takes control. The part of us that is not enlightened, but has been fed by years of fear, guilt, anger, and uncontrollable desires. As if the darkest side of the mind, suppressed all your life, can finally emerge. not as a concept, but as an entity. And then they appear. Numbers, distorted faces, eyes that glow, voices that mock. It does not matter your religious faith. It doesn't matter if you were good or bad, because this is not a sentence, it's a reflex. And now the mirror shows you what you never wanted to see. How many shadows have you pushed to the back of your mind throughout your life? How many truths have you hidden under the emotional carpet? Now in the Bard they take shape, and you are stuck with them. But a prisoner of what exactly? Of your own mind, because the fear you feel now is fueled by you. Every horrific sight that appears is not a divine punishment. It is a projection, a hologram created by the purity of your emotional field. And the more you react with terror, the more power these figures gain. They feed on your escape. They grow with your refusal. Now imagine a woman who has manipulated others with her pain her entire life, who has used victimization as a form of control. In the Bard, she finds herself surrounded by figures who beg for help, cry, scream for help. She tries to help them, but they ignore her. They continue to suffer, and she feels everyone's pain. And the more she tries to justify herself, the more these visions intensify until she finds herself drowning in a sea of torment of her own making. It's real, it's an illusion, it depends on awareness. Why are we so afraid to look at what we repress? Because the idea that we are darker than we appear is unbearable. We prefer to cling to polished personas, to heroic biographies, to well-written apologies. But death does not accept narrative. It simply unfolds, and in the Bard, the narrative falls apart. Blavatsky called this moment the dark night of the soul, the state in which the light disappears and the seeker faces the abyss within, a spiritual test to see who you are when no one is looking, when the body's gone. No language, no defense, just you and your shadow. But what if the shadow is not the enemy? What if it is an invitation, an opportunity for integration, not repulsion? What if every terrifying figure you encounter in the Bard is just a part of you, asking to be recognized? It's an uncomfortable hypothesis, but it could change everything. Imagine a man who has spent his entire life hiding his pride behind a facade of humility. In the Bard, he sees a huge creature with an imposing voice, commanding him to bow. He's angry, fear, shame, try to run. But what if that creature is your rejected pride, taking shape to confront it? What if, by accepting its existence, he dispels it? The problem is that almost no one thinks of the Bard that way, because the emotions are too strong, the images too real. And the most primitive instinct is activated: flight. But in the Bard, there is nowhere to run. Running from fear is running in circles inside yourself. What would you do if the worst nightmare you've ever had came to life in front of you and said, "I am you"? Because that's exactly what is happening. And if you have not trained your mind to recognize illusion as illusion, you will fall like everyone else. The mind must confront itself, because without confrontation, there is no transcendence, only repetition. Now imagine yourself in a dark space, a timeless field alone, but surrounded by figures you do not understand. Some are crying, some are screaming, some are just watching. They are all you, parts of you that you have denied, distorted, hidden, and you want to run. But then you stop breathing, and he says, "I accept you." It will argue, it will beg, it will cry for help. And the more you do this, the more trapped you will be. The key, according to Blavatsky's teaching, is impersonal observation, the ability to look at horrors without judging them, to recognize the shadow without panicking. From the words, "I see you to what frightens you most, because what you observe without fear dissolves." But who prepares for this in life? Few. Most are too busy trying to avoid discomfort, avoiding silence, animating pain with distraction. But this anesthesia takes its toll, and in the Bard it is paid back with interest, because everything you did not want to feel, you will feel. Everything you avoided will come not as a punishment, but as a balance, as a universal balance. And not just as the author of the action, but as the one who received it. If you are hurt, you will feel the pain you caused. If you loved, you will feel the warmth you caused. Every action is reflected in the entire field of your consciousness, and you become both the sender and the receiver. There is no longer any possibility of hiding behind excuses and interpretations. At this point, one of them smiles, another disappears into the light, the third disappears. Is this real, or could this be the true meaning of healing? The dark night of the soul is not the end. It is a crossing, but only those who do not get lost in fear, who do not identify themselves as a shadow, who understand that even horror is pedagogical, and that behind every scream there is a chance to wake up, cross it. Elena Blavatsky warned, "The soul is judged not by an external deity, but by itself, and it is afraid to face itself." Thus, fear is just an echo of unconsciousness itself, and silence, if accepted, becomes the key to breaking the spell. But how many will know this when the time comes? Most will succumb to pain. You will succumb to fear, and you will return to the cycle of birth and death again. Forgetfulness, starting over, suffering, as if nothing had happened, as if the dark night was just a meaningless nightmare. But for the few who know, the dark night will be a portal not of punishment, but of liberation. And these few, as Blavatsky predicted, will change the course of humanity, starting with themselves. Now look within. What do you see? Perhaps the night has already begun. As the shadows dissipate and fear loses its power, something strange happens. There are no angels, no demons, no light, and no darkness. There is an empty space, a silent interval where everything seems to stand still. The bard's chaos falls asleep, and it is in this emptiness that judgment approaches, but not the judgment that the religions promised. There is no heavenly throne, no judge's gavel, no divine sentence. What is happening is much deeper, much more merciless. Elena Blavatsky called this moment the great mirror of karma, an inevitable event when the soul, stripped of all protection, finds itself facing itself. Literally, but not as a memory, as a rebirth. Everything returns, every gesture, every word, every thought, everything you thought you had forgotten, everything you tried to justify, it's there waiting. The difference is that now you feel it intensely. There is no narrative anymore. There is only the truth. Can you imagine that? To relive every moment of your life, but from the perspective of everyone else involved, to feel what the other felt, unfiltered, uncensored, unprotected. The man who cheated impulsively sees himself through the eyes of the betrayed. The woman who is manipulated by fear feels manipulated. The father who abandoned becomes the child who waited and cried. And this is not symbolism, this is direct experience. It is inevitable, it is total. Modern studies of near-death patients unexpectedly report similar experiences. In a study conducted in the Netherlands and published in the journal Lancet, 18% of people who survived cardiac arrest reported a life review in which they felt the impact of their actions on other people. In some cases, people who had never heard of spirituality have said that they have experienced the love and pain of others as if it were their own. Could this be a coincidence? Blavatsky would say, no. I would say that consciousness is not limited by the body or time, that the soul, having left the flesh, reconnects to a larger field where everything experienced remains recorded. This field, which she called the auric record or etheric memory, is like a mirror that does not distort. It is simply visible. And what happens when your own truth is revealed to you? Without retouching, without filters, without illusions. For some, it is an explosion of light, a bath of peace, a confirmation that they have lived honestly, compassionately, with integrity. For others, it is a plunge into emotional mud, an overwhelming sense of shame, guilt, regret. Not because they are condemned by an outside force, but because they feel on their spiritual skin all that they have done. Now imagine a man who has spent his entire life emotionally exploiting others, always with soft words, always looking good. In the bard's mirror, he sees himself not as he was, but as he was seen. What was that like? And it devastates him. He tries to explain, try to justify it, but there is no more speech. There is only experience. Your image crumbles, your personality dissolves. And what remains is the pure impact of who he really was. How many lives have you lived hiding behind an image? How many times have you betrayed yourself out of convenience? How many times have you kept silent out of fear? How many times have you accepted the unacceptable to maintain the illusion of control? It all comes. It all comes back. And the hardest thing is to realize that you can no longer change. You can only accept it or resist it. But there's a catch. How you respond to this review determines what happens next. If you despair, if you continue to repent, if you blame yourself excessively, you fall. The weight of what you feel becomes a spiritual density, and the soul, like an emotional magnet, will be drawn to a new birth, compatible with this purity. Blavatsky said that the universe neither punishes nor rewards, it only reflects. And it is in this mirror that you will see yourself more clearly than ever before. Then the real question becomes, can you see yourself without hating yourself? Can you accept it without condemning yourself? Can you welcome it without getting attached? Because those who succeed transcend, not because they were perfect, but because they were whole, because they saw themselves through the eyes of being, not the ego, because they let pain pass them by without identifying with it. That is the difference between enlightenment and repetition. But why is this part so forgotten in traditional religions? Because it requires autonomy. And the person who knows that he will be fully responsible for his ultimate destiny is the person who does not bend. It does not hand over its power to the intermediaries who do not submit to dogma for fear of hell, because they know that hell, if it exists, is only a reflection of the mind that created it. And here is the disturbing fact. Tibetan scholars estimate that only one soul out of every 100,000 fully recognizes the mirror and passes through it in clear consciousness. The rest fall, get attached, get entangled. And they return, not because they do not deserve freedom, but because they cannot free themselves from themselves. How did you prepare for this mirror? What did you do today, now, at this moment? What can you remember without pain? How often do you act with full awareness? How many times do you ask yourself, what would I do to someone else? Because one day you will no longer ask that question. You will feel it. And in that feeling, the whole structure of who you thought you were will collapse. And something new can appear, something truer, lighter, wider. But only if you allow it, if you accept it. If you love, yes, love. Because love in a bard is not an emotion, it is an expansion. It is the ability to merge with what you previously condemned, feared, or despised. Loving yourself in this moment is not vanity, it is spiritual survival. Because only love holds the soul in the mirror without breaking it. And maybe if you are ready, you can cross. And seeing the other side is not a destination, but a door. What if that door is already here in front of you? There is nothing more to fear, nothing more to face. The soul has passed through the vision, overcome the shadows of fear, faced the pain of seeing your own life without filters. And at the end of the crossing, when everything seems to have calmed down, a new danger approaches. But it has no face. It is not scary. It does not hurt. It seduces. At this moment, the most important choice of the soul is made, and almost no one is aware that they are making a choice. It is here, floating in the space between worlds. A strange lightness, as if freed from an ancient heaviness. But instead of emptiness, it feels an invitation, a whisper, a challenge. The visions return, but now in a different tone. The face of the mother, the laughter of the son, the place where he grew up, the smell of wet earth after the rain, the sound of an old song. It arises from the precise purity of your consciousness. Like a spiritual algorithm, it reveals everything that is not yet decided within you. Everything that you still desire, fear, or refuse to let go. And on the basis of this, the next reality is constructed, not by God, but for you. Imagine a man who lived obsessed with recognition. Everything the soul once knew appears. Everything that still retains traces of emotion, but in a sweeter, more subtle, more seductive way. It is the perfect trap. The soul feels no fear. It misses this, and so it surrenders. Longing, like an invisible thread, pulls her. Blavatsky called it the karmic magnetization of matter. There is no being that pulls the soul back into the world. It is the soul that pulls itself, anchors itself, chooses without even knowing it to return. the yearning, the desire to experience again, the attachment to what was good, familiar, safe. All this is the silent call of reincarnation. But understand, this call is not cruel. It is precise. He died afraid of being forgotten. At the end of the Bard, he feels a vision of a crowd cheering for him, a life of admiration, important, and he gives up. He does not understand that this is not real. It is only a reflection of what he still carries with him. And when you give up, you enter a new body, are born again. And forget everything. It is a cycle. It is samsara, a wheel that goes round and round, fed by unconsciousness, due to lack of preparation, due to lack of awareness. But it should not be this way. The soul, having recognized the catch, does not allow itself to be carried away. She doesn't give in to comfort. She watches the visions, but she doesn't merge with them. She hears the calls, but she doesn't answer. She misses him, but she doesn't bow. Because it's not real. It's a projection, an echo of a mind trying to survive. This soul is breaking free, but it requires a state of consciousness that can't be improvised. Blavatsky said, "A liberated soul is one that, while still alive, already knew how to die." And what does it mean to know how to die? It does not become attached. It is not a belief in the seductive voices of personality. It is to look at the world through the eyes of a person who knows that everything passes. This wisdom cannot be achieved simply by reading, even with prayer, not even with rituals. It is born from the direct experience of impermanence, from training and saying goodbye to a loved one, to love without possessing, to live without dependence, to be here, but not from here. Most souls do not pass this final test not out of malice, but out of naivety, because they were not taught, because they lived their whole lives without even thinking about the fact that death is the moment of decision-making, because they believe that after everything there will be peace, a reward, eternal peace. But a bard is not a prize, not a punishment. It is a test of conscience, and those who sleep fall asleep again. Now imagine a woman who, after the end of the bard's experiences, sees an image of her little daughter, a daughter he left too soon, a daughter he could never forget. She sees her smiling and calling her name, a field of flowers, an evening. It all seems so real, so bright, that's for sure. And then, with her heart ablaze with excitement, she runs towards that image. And the next moment, you're in a new body, a new cycle, another forgetfulness, another start. All because I didn't know how to say no. There's no harm in that, but there is repetition. And repetition is the opposite of liberation. What if, in that moment, you had just a moment of awareness? Just a sip of clarity to realize that what you're seeing is a temptation of the mind. Is it enough to change everything? The Tibetan tradition says yes, that a second of presence, a flash of insight can dispel all illusions, because what maintains the cycle is not reality, it is oblivion. Blavatsky never tired of repeating, truth is in recognition, not in perfection. You don't have to be perfect, just wake up. Just imagine, because in the end there is no God watching you. Here you are, your own mind. These are echoes, your choices, and above all, your level of consciousness. These are invisible choices, the ones that happen without you noticing, that are not accompanied by signs, questions, or clear alternatives. It's made according to your reaction, in what you want, what you cannot give up. And if you want to prepare for this choice, start right now, not waiting for death, but living death. Die today to who you think you are. Die to your attachments, to your vanity, to your needs, to your narrative, because when the moment comes, there will be no time to think. There will be only what you trained for, what you cultivated, what you became. And if you became free, then you will be free. Bardabara is not just a place between life and death. This is a reflection of your inner world, and here the inner world is formed. Now with every choice, with every thought, with every silent renunciation. When Elena Blavatsky wrote that the soul chooses the door through which it re-enters the world, she was not talking about a rational choice, but from a vibration, from a state, from emotional memories that you carry without even realizing it. And if you stop for a moment and take a deep breath, Perhaps you will feel this vibration right now. It is in you and it is already making a choice, but you can change it. It can increase your purity. You can break the vicious circle. It can silence desire. You can observe longing without submitting to it. You can recognize an image and not follow it. You can choose, not choose, and in this not choose, be free. This is the secret that Blavatsky left to those few who dared to understand. The last portal does not open with effort, not even force. It opens with abandon, with delivery, as if you don't need it anymore. Are you ready to no longer need it? Then maybe, just maybe, you are already breaking free. Everything you've heard so far hasn't just been about death. It's been about life, because in the end, it's not about crossing the bard, it's about the crossroads. And that journey doesn't begin when the heart stops beating. It begins when you decide to live consciously, when you refuse to be one of those who repeat, react, obey without asking. When you dare to stop and ask yourself, who am I really? Why am I here? What happens next? What happens now? Death is not an isolated event. It is the culmination of everything you've cultivated in life, the end result of what you've believed, fed, hidden, or silenced. It simply opens up. It simply exposes. Just repeat out loud what you've been whispering every day. Elena Blavatsky tried to warn us. He tried to write about it at a time when talking about conscience was heresy, when questioning religion was a risk of excommunication, when saying that the soul doesn't die was a joke. She faced all this and more. She was ridiculed. It was silent. But it did not stop because she knew that what was at stake was not a philosophical debate. This was the freedom of the human soul, the same freedom that is now knocking on your door. If you have come this far, if you have heard every word, if you have felt every image, every shadow, and every light that passes through this scenario, then you are already moving. You are already feeling it. It is already awakening. But this awakening needs roots, maintaining continuity. There is no point in opening your eyes and closing them again. So here is the plan. Simple, profound, and practical. First, practice conscious forgetting. It's true, forget, but forget what you are not. Forget your papers, your name, your status, your history. Once a week, sit in silence and ask yourself, who am I without memories, without a body? No desires? The mind will resist. You're going to scream, go, invent it. But go on, this is the training of the bard. Because if you know how to forget in life, you know how to let go in death. Second, accept everything, absolutely everything. Start with what is near. Accept the impatience you feel in a traffic jam. Accept the loneliness you hide on social media. Accept the melancholy, the anger, the boredom. Feel it, be aware of it, but don't hold on. Don't react. Just look, because in the bard, everything you reject turns into a shadow, but what you accept dissolves. Third, die a little every day. Not literally, but energetically. Let go. An object you keep without using, a habit that no longer serves, an opinion you defend out of pride, a cycle that is already over. Learn to die in small ways. That way, the big death won't be scary. It will be just one more step. Fourth, cultivate presence. You already know this, but perhaps you still don't understand why. Presence is not only for living better, it is better to die, because the mind trained to be here and now is the same one that in the bard does not allow itself to be carried away by illusions. Presence is the antidote to falling. It is the anchor that prevents spiritual shipwreck. And finally, study, but not for accumulation. Learn to remember, to wake up, to play what you already know but have forgotten. Study the bard, study Blavatsky, study yourself. Take notebooks and write down dreams, intuitions, discomforts. Ask yourself every day, what am I avoiding to feel that I am ready to let go? This is the path. And maybe you don't do it all at once. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll forget. All is well. The soul doesn't want perfection, it wants truth. And truth is movement, it's an attempt, it's sincerity. You may cry listening to this. Maybe something inside you is already saying, I remember. And remembering is everything, because what is remembered is not lost. And the soul that remembers is the soul that awakens. The ultimate truth is this. Death does not change who you are. It simply unfolds. And you can choose what is unfolded. If you live in fear, in attachment, in illusion, that is what you will see. But if you live with presence, with detachment, with love, then you will cross over as a person awakening from sleep. No fear. With open eyes, of course. The world needs awakened souls. You are needed. Because when you wake up, you heal. Heal yourself. Heal your family. Your lineage heals, time heals. And maybe one day we'll meet on the other side. And you'll say, I heard and I'm ready, and I'll just smile in silence. If this video touched something inside you, don't let it go. Comment below, even anonymously, what you felt. What doubts arose, what memories returned. Share your process, no matter how small it may seem. This isn't about vanity, it's about connection. Like this video so it reaches those who need it, and subscribe to the Beyond Knowledge channel. This is where we cross the invisible together. Because the truth isn't out there, it's where you've always been. Here,